Okay, good. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic, nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Jessica's trying to join and she says the link is not working. Oh. Okay. Right? Uh-huh. Okay. All right, we'd like to excuse the members of the board who are not here, have some sickness and some travel, and Jessica will be joining us remotely. She's attempting to do that right now. All right, public comment will occur during the meeting's public comment portion. You can raise your hand remotely or in person. Once acknowledged, please state your name and ward to include it in the minutes, and please limit your time to 3 minutes. Public comment is governed by policy BEDH. Are there any additions or deletions from the agenda?
No, I would like to make a suggestion that the enrollment study presentation go first up. Thank you.
Okay. So we will do that right after we finish the consent agenda, so that our people do not have to stand online for very long. Great. Is there any public comment in the room? All right. Is there any public comment online?
There is no public comment online.
Okay, great. Yeah, don't look at it. All right. Is there any, we don't have a student report today, it looks like, and there is no correspondence, so we'll go straight to a motion to approve the public minutes from February 26th.
Make a motion to approve the public minutes from February 26, 2025.
Okay. Thank you. Are there any corrections to the agenda? Oh, sorry, second was Wendy. I'm sorry. Motion by MJ, second by Wendy. Are there any corrections? No? Okay. All those in favor? Yes? Jessica is not on yet. Hold on. She can't hear. It says she is attempting to see if it's her or if it's us. Yeah, okay. So I'm saying working on it.
Hi there.
Ah, there you are. Hooray.
Yay.
Okay, thank you. We'll go ahead and pass the. All right, Jessica, we're moving on to a motion to approve the non-public minutes.
Make a motion to approve the non-public minutes from February 26, 2025.
Motion by MJ, second by Wendy. Are there any corrections from those? Oh, okay. All those in favor? We have to do a roll call vote now because Jessica's here. Jessica, could you state if you are alone or not?
I am not like in the world.
Right. No, just say where you are and if you're alone or if you're not. That's all you have to say.
I'm in my living room. There is no one else here
Okay,
right now.
Perfect. Yeah. All right, and because you're online, we're going to do a roll call vote for this. So, Kevin?
Yes.
Richard?
Yes.
MJ?
Yes.
I'm a yes. Wendy?
Yes.
Tia?
Yes.
And Jessica?
Abstain.
Okay. All right, so we are going to move on to the enrollment study.
Thank you. Tonight we are joined with Matthew Cropper, who has completed our demographic study reports. Hi, Matthew.
Hello, how are you doing today? Can you hear me okay?
We can.
Okay, great. If I could possibly share my screen, is that possible to go through some of my report, or would you like me just to speak verbally over it?
I'm looking at my IT, seeing if that.
Okay, I think I have it now. Okay, so you should see my screen now, see the presentation cover. I wanted to thank you for the opportunity to be here and present to you this evening remotely. I am Matthew Cropper with Cropper GIS Consulting. We are a K-12 planning firm that does this kind of work all over the country. We have worked with districts of all sizes, and we do this kind of work. This is our expertise. We have worked with Lebanon in the past. I think the last time we did a study for you was back in 2015, and our results have been tracking pretty well, but was time to do an update. So we were hired to do a demographic study for the district, and talking a little bit about our study and our process. We have applied demographers on staff that actually work through a full population study of your area. Our belief is that in order for you to really understand what's going to happen with enrollment in your district, it's important to know what's going to happen with the population as a whole, because there's a lot of things that are going on within housing and with households inside your district, and the age structure of the households is very telling in terms of where they are in the life cycle, whether they're aging and almost empty nesting, or they're on the verge of turning over and younger families moving in. And so we study a lot of age structure and do an actual population forecast before we even look at enrollment. That population forecast takes into account a lot of things: housing starts, new home construction plans, existing home sales. We look at mortality and fertility, and then that population forecast actually drives an enrollment forecast. Other ways that you may have seen enrollment studies is that they'll look heavily on historical enrollment, and they'll establish some trend lines, and then they look at births and some housing, and then that carries that trend line forward. That most common process is called cohort survival. Our method is what we call cohort component, which is doing a population study first and letting that population forecast drive the enrollment. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the pop forecast results, and then talk about enrollment. And I'm just going to browse through some key sections in the report that we had delivered to you for the results of this study. One of the things that we always say is that we aren't fortune tellers, and so there's a lot of things that we can't control in this world that may not be foreseen, that we can't anticipate. And so one of the things that we do is we establish a set of assumptions, and the assumptions are political, economic, things related to state regulation policy and things like that as it relates to private schools and vouchers, and then other things that relate to the economy. So some of the key things, like some of these key assumptions that I'll note are, for example, the 30-year fixed for home mortgages stays below 8%. It's been going up and down. I think right now it's around 6.5%, somewhere around there. It was as low as 3, really low right around COVID time, and it's got up close to 8%, maybe even tipped a little bit over 8%. The way the home mortgage works is if it gets over 8% and it sustains, the higher that mortgage rate gets, what it does is it slows down existing home sales. And so as that mortgage rate goes higher, what it does is it slows down the normal turn and churn of home sales activity, people moving out, moving in, and your enrollment. If this number in mortgage goes up above 8%, we're probably going to be running a little higher than what your actual enrollment will be. If that mortgage rate goes back down to 3%, which we don't anticipate that happening, then we may be a little low on your enrollment forecast, and if it goes lower, it's going to spawn in more home sales activity, and we may end up being below what your actual enrollment is. We do other assumptions in here that talks about foreclosures, and a lot of what we're looking at is studying activity since COVID, post-COVID, and we're assuming that things are going to be similar to what they have been since things have kind of somewhat stabilized since COVID. And that includes students transferring in and out of your school district, the public to private participation rates, and those things. Another key assumption with your district is that the Grantham and Plainfield school districts remain in your as a feeder in your district. And that's something that that we anticipate maintaining, certainly. And then the final assumption that we put in here is something that relates to housing. And we're assuming that we did collect information from your local planning agencies in terms of where homes are being built, the number of units, what type of homes they are. And when we look at that, we're assuming that you're going to have a yearly average of 130 existing units bought and sold, and then 130 new multifamily home units for the next 10 years. Most of your new home construction that we've seen, the big share of it is multifamily. There are some single families, but I think that the important key thing to note is that we can't just focus on new home construction where new homes are being built. It's that what's going on with your existing housing structure, your existing households in the district, it's a much more dominant factor in change of enrollment. Some key things that we found when we were doing our population study was a couple of interesting things that I always like to look at are percentage of households of population under 18. Your district as a whole have about 19.5% of your households in your district have population under 18. And that means that you have a little over 80% of the households in your district don't even have school-age children in them. And so that's something that you have to factor. And as we look at that, that's a little bit higher than what we typically see. Normally, it's around 70-30 is what we usually see in some districts. And so you have a little bit higher proportion of households with population under 18. Also, Grantham and Plainfield, you could see that they have a little bit higher proportion of households under 18. So they have a little bit higher concentration of households with population under 18 that feed into your district. And then we look at other data that we pull and look at. Study tells us things about householders age 35 to 54. So this is the predominant age cohort or age group of householders that have children in their households. And then we look at householders age 65 plus, which we start seeing indicators for potential turnover and of homes. And then we look at renters to owners and things like that as well. There are a lot of renters in your area, mostly due to the college, to Dartmouth being so close, and things like that. So you do have a higher proportion of renters in the area. Let's see. So some of these other ones, like single person households at 65 plus, that's a key variable for turnover, the highest likelihood of homes turning over in the next 10 years or so. And so these are all different demographic variables that we study when we look at the population and develop our population forecast. Another key one that's interesting, that's notable here, that we like to look at is underage, under 1 to 13-year-olds by age from the census. And this is as of 2020, they count how many people are of each particular age that's noted here on the table. This helps us identify things that may just natural ebbs and flows of different population cohort sizes. And it helps us understand where there may just be a blip in an abnormally large age group and not necessarily indicator of a trend. You could see some of this in data, like if you look at the number of 3-year-olds in the district in 2020 had 125, 2-year-olds, there's 159. So as those kids age into the system, we would have expected to see a bump, about 30 kids increase in that particular year to year when those kids start aging into the system, because the census tells us there's more students coming in at that age group. And this helps us identify those sort of the demographic variables and isolates things that are demographic, and and helps us ensure that we don't anticipate a trend when it may just be a little blip in the enrollment. Another thing that we like to do is we do a population pyramid that helps us see the age structure of your area. And in the report, I give a summary on how to interpret pyramids and kind of some of the typologies of pyramids. We have the different characteristics of population pyramids that help tell us things about the age structure of the population. And you could see here in interpreting a pop pyramid, on the left side, you have 0 to 4-year-olds, 5 to 9-year-olds, all the way up to 85 plus. And then the bottom number is separated by males and females so that we can look at fertility and those types of factors the demographers study. But the 0 to 4 as of 2020 would have been your preschool cohort. And then the 5 to 9 would have been elementary age kids. And then you have your middle school cohort, high school. You get up into the predominant ages where families start to form, and then households with kids, getting up and then into empty nesters and turnover households. Your district, and looking at your district, you can see your pop pyramid. You have a large proportion in the 20s and 30s, and this is a lot of this is the college, the sort of college population in the area. But one of the things to note is that you could see you do have a larger number of 0 to 4-year-olds than 5 to 9. So if in the absence of any migration, if just the population were just staying in place and aging through, you would have seen some enrollment growth because the 0 to 4-year-olds coming in are larger than the 5 to 9. And then that 5 to 9 is somewhat similar in size to 10 to 14. So this kind of helps us identify, just with this existing population that you have right now, what should have happened since 2020, and then also what do we anticipate forecasting out in the out years for the population aging in place. On top of that, we factor in the in-migration, which is from new homes being built, and also people moving in, and the net, which is the net of people moving out as well. We have, and I'll zoom out a little bit so you could see the difference between the 2020 and the 2035 pyramids, and you can see they do look a little bit different. You still have that larger 0 to 4 group, and this is typical what we see in a lot of sort of a suburban type pattern. But then you could see as the population from 2020 to 2035 that the population is aging, and there's a lot more people in 40 to 44, 45 to 49. Those bars in the higher age groups are starting to fill out a lot more. But the 25 to 34 kind of stays really similar in size, just because that's stable because of the university college group quarters population and things like that. We have one of these for every single one of your schools. And one of the things to note is that every school looks different in terms of how the population, the age structure of the population and things like that. And so these are always really helpful for us to study and see what's going on with your existing population. Grantham's another good example. If you look at Grantham, you could see that they actually have a deficit in 0 to 4. And so the 0 to 4-year-olds in 2020 was less than the 5 to 9-year-olds. And so in a case like this in Grantham, which we did do a pop study for Grantham as well, and Plainfield, but in this case, this district or this area of your district would rely on people moving in or in migration in order to just maintain to break even. If nobody moved in or moved out in Grantham, their population, their school age population would go down. And so you have a mix of this going on with some of your feeder school areas, and then also your primary area that you serve in Lebanon. And you can see Plainfield as well. Again, some of the similar things. When the pyramid looks more pillar shaped, it's really indicative of more stable population, and not so many swings as we may see in a suburban pattern. So looking at your population forecast for this area, we have the total population going up. You could see it was 14,270 in 2020. We have you at 15,000, around 15,240 now. So up about 1,000 since 2020. And we have you going up about about 2,500 more people total in the next 10 years. Your population is aging. As you could see, we have components of change here, but one of the components of change that we study are deaths. And so that as the population ages, we anticipate a larger number of deaths occurring in the area. And then births also, because we are seeing in-migration, net in-migration in your district, that's bringing in families with younger children. And so we do see the birth numbers going up slightly. We have you 850 from 2020 till now. And then we had you going up slightly to about 900 and then just sort of leveling off to about 890 births. And then it relates to net migration. That's the factor of how many people are leaving versus how many people are coming into your district. And you could see we have a good, healthy net in migration from 2020 to 25. And we do see that kind of tapering down a little bit. We have tapering down just slightly through the period of the forecast as the population ages and things like that. But you still have a pretty healthy net in migration expected in your district. So we have these forecasts for every single one of the schools that we could see, and they vary from school to school. But and then we also have a population forecast for Grantham Village, and then also for Plainfield, and then finally we get to your district forecasted enrollment. I'll zoom up on this a little bit for you. But as you could see here, we have your enrollments we expect it to dip a little bit and then go back up. And so it's at around 560 for pre-K4 right now. We anticipate that going down, but then coming back up to into the 560s within the next 5 years. And then that's the second 5-year period, we anticipate your elementary enrollment to continue to increase to about 595 at the end of this forecast period. For your middle school population, your 5th through 8th grade, that enrollment is very stable. That's actually going to go up and pop at about 480, and then it's going to level back down at the end of this forecast period to about what it is right now. And then the high school does show a slight decline, but before that happens, we are seeing some increases as cohorts are aging through into your system that are already here. We anticipate that your enrollment's going to go up a little bit next couple years to up around 630, and then that's going to level off. And at the end of this forecast period, it's going to be down about around 25 high school students, down to about 576 at the end of the period. And so then when you look at total preschool through 12 or your total enrollment, it really looks relatively stable. It's going kind of just a little bit down and then up, kind of a little bit of a wave happening. But at the end of the forecast period, your total enrollment is forecasted to be really close to what it is this year. And so when we have enrollment forecast reports for every single school in here, and I also have other data that we use to support the study. But with that said, I think that's about all I have. I'd be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
People increase in the number of Lebanon residents. Now I'm on the planning board as well, and we have approved, not just myself, but in previous years before I joined the planning board, by my last count, around 1,360 units for construction, both single occupancy and multiple occupancy. And these are just the large developments, not counting things like cottage clusters and the pattern zoning that's before the voters next week. And I'm wondering how many units you accounted for in this forecast, and why that number seems so small?
Yes. So we did collect information from the planning agency in which they provided us a list, and that lines up with what you said. We have 1288 projects approved, and some of them are in different phases and different stages of being developed. And so we do have a good handle on what's being planned, what's being approved, and what's going on within the district. But the one of the things to note is that in addition to this, we also study the how many homes have been bought and sold historically in your district. And so what we like to do is when we look at the number of units that are approved in your area, we also have to take kind of what we feel is a gut check on how many new homes can the market bear in any particular area that we're studying. And from what we're seeing, that we see that the threshold is around 260 or so, I think is what we had estimated in here with existing homes and new multifamily units. I think it was 130 existing homes and then 130 new multifamily homes. And so this is what we have seen in your area historically. And we don't anticipate that number to the only thing that's really going to spike an increase in home sales activity or new homes being built is if there is an increase in the demand for the homes. And so when we look at this, we say, okay, we've got this number of homes that are in the pipeline that you've identified, that the area has identified. But we also have to look and see, okay, how many realistically do we think are going to come online every year? And we don't want to over forecast that or over assume that, because then we would end up being over forecasting for enrollment and over forecasting your in-migration.
Yeah, it occurs to me that we have a daytime population that is 1/3 of the nighttime population, and that, you know, we could build 3 times as many housing units as are currently scheduled, and they would all sell. So I guess I'm just a little concerned that that number still seems very low to me. That's all.
So, sort of piggybacking on that, I think what had conversations with the city, they've often indicated that units that are being built are not necessarily going to generate students.
That's also true. Yeah.
And so is that what you're finding as well? So even if there's the type of housing that's being approved isn't necessarily the type of housing that would generate children.
That is correct. One of the things that a large number of the homes that are planned are there are some multifamily in there. Multifamily homes typically don't yield many students. I think we see on average about 0.15 students per every multifamily unit, where in single family units we see somewhere around 0.4 students from every single family unit. And so and then I think that a lot of the homes that are coming in are those that are multifamily. Like of that 1288, 474 and I'm just looking at one development, the Brickyard, it's multifamily rental, 3-bedroom units.
That's actually not current. They're 421 of those units are actually studio and 1-beds, and they're building 51 townhouses.
Okay, so yeah, so there are multifamily developments, and typically the 3 bedrooms can yield more students, more children. But you start getting into 1 and 2 bedroom units, the yields start to go down pretty substantially.
Yeah, that makes sense. A question about the households over 65, single-person households over 65. Do you have an idea of the overlap between that number, at 23.8% of households that are single-person and 65 plus, and the percentage of households holders who own their homes. Is the majority of those 65 plus single person households, are those owned by those people, and therefore do those go on the market as purchasable single family homes, for instance, that a family might move into?
Usually, yes. Usually 65 and older single person households. In most cases, I would say the lion's share of that population are homeowners, and not renters. And so that is the primary variable that we look at for the greatest likelihood of short-term turnover, where they're going in the near term going to turn over homes, and younger families likely to move in.
So just so I'm reading this correctly, basically a quarter of homes in Lebanon are single person and over 65, and most of those are owned.
Yes, sir.
Wow.
That's correct.
Okay.
So can I ask a follow-up question to that too? 'Cause in Lebanon, we have two significant retirement type. So I think we have Guile Hill, right? That's 55 and older, so they would have, those might be apartments, multifamily, with just single people in them. And then we have all the APD stuff. So how does that sort of skew those numbers potentially of that 60, like those, we might have a bunch of that 65 and older in homes that aren't actually going to turn over younger families.
Correct. Yes. And so there are, we do look at group quarters. Some of the data that we analyze, we do study group quarters, and group quarters population, it does get captured in that retirement setting. And so we do look at that and study the difference between that and sort of the resident households in the district. So it is something that it's common that we see, that's the normal occurrence in our work. And I was going to see if there was anything it's showing in the pop pyramid. Sometimes in the pop pyramids, you'll see if it's in a particular zone, that the 85 plus bar is much higher. And you could see, like in Hanover Street Elementary, how the 85 plus bar is greater than the 80-84. And then there's almost 3 times as many females as males. This really tells us that this is indicative of a retirement home, community type dynamic in this particular area.
I think Jessica's raising her hand. Jessica?
Hi there. Can you hear me?
Yeah, go ahead.
So I had a question about the, I think it was Appendix D that you were showing us, that was the projections per grade, per school. And I think it showed that all of the pre-K projections for every year were 49.
Yes.
And I was curious about that.
Yes, we usually will hold pre-K constant, because if you look at pre-K, 49 pre-K seats in the district right now. If you look at that and you compare that to the total population for Lebanon, you could see there are about 760 0 to 4-year-olds. And so people always ask us, well, how if we were to expand pre-K, how big could we make it? And pre-K is everywhere we work, it's a very popular program, and it usually fills to capacity. So we typically tell districts that when we study enrollment, what we like to do is we like to isolate the demographic trends, and then from things that could be more policy or like choice driven. And so that's why we typically flatline pre-K, and so that when you see the enrollment change in our forecast, it's more of a demographics and not as the district sort of expands your program to say 100 students or something like that. So that's why we hold pre-K constant through the life of the forecast, just to isolate the demographic trends as from the forecast.
So it's really, so in that instance, it's not really, it's an enrollment forecast based simply on the number of seats that we are currently making available to pre-K and not based on anything to do with the demographics. That's space limited based on what our program can take. So we just hold it constant, but that's not a reflection of what looks like it is an actual increase in those, an increasing sort of 0 to 4 age population in Lebanon.
That is correct. You got
Okay, thank you.
have about 700 preschool age children in your area. And so I would imagine that you could expand your pre-K to be similar in cohort size as your other grade cohorts, which are somewhere around around 100. So I think you could expand your pre-K and it would fill up as much as you choose to do so.
Thank you.
MJ and then Richard.
So I just have a question going back to your assumptions, talking about no additional charter schools open in the district over the next 10 years. So I know that a charter school has recently been approved in the elementary to open up somewhere in the Upper Valley. I don't know if they have space yet. I think their projection is for next year. So I'm just wondering if that charter school was included in your assumptions or if that was not, because they don't have enrollment yet.
Do you know the name of the charter by chance?
Yeah, I think it's called Cornerstone.
Cornerstone. Okay. I will follow up with our demographer to see if he's aware of that. I would guess that if it hasn't been, if it's not in place, hasn't been factored into it. But I will check with him and follow up with you on that.
Okay, thank you.
So also, in the light of things that might affect these numbers, did you happen to pay any attention to the large amount of work that's gone into the rezoning around the Route 120 corridor? A large swath of Lebanon is currently about to be rezoned from light industrial to general commercial, which allows for the building of housing and mixed use developments. And I'm wondering if there might be a lot of, let's say, housing aimed at families to go in there. Would that make a significant difference in your projections?
I think it would. What we like to do when we do these forecasts is rely on things that are more certain as it relates to housing plans and changes in infrastructure and things like that are approved, that we know sort of a more definitive timeline for them. Because what we're always fighting against when we do these studies, and I wouldn't say fighting against, but one of our challenges in doing these studies is making sure that we don't over forecast, because a lot of times there's a lot of development information and things like that we hear about, but a lot of times those developments are being spoken about and it may almost seem like it's certainly going to happen, but then there seems to be a lag period from time to time. And so what I think it's more important is to focus on things that we know are going to happen. And if something were to happen, like the 120 corridor were to expand with a substantial change in housing infrastructure and things like that, that's when I would probably we would want to keep an eye on your enrollment and see what's happening with that and incorporate that into an updated forecast for you. I think you're better off not accounting for things that are more speculative and not approved and sort of certainly going to happen.
An addendum to that, from time to time, the planning board is presented with plans for developments that require impact statements on, among other things, school enrollment. Are you a person that the planning board could reach out to for second opinions based on those?
Yes, sir. We do that for a lot of communities in the country. We do a lot of pupil yield studies, as you probably know, can understand across the country. And so we do a lot of that work for districts. And if doing something for your district, one of the things that we have done in our work is, in addition to doing enrollment forecasting, we've also studied your enrollment and mapped out your students. And so we could see, you'll see some maps in the demographic study that shows student density analysis. And these are like heat maps. So we actually map out the students so we know how many kids live in any particular neighborhood. And this helps us when our demographic study to understand densities of neighborhoods and other communities and things like that. And that we could leverage some of the data that we've already developed to help with something like that down the road.
That sounds good. Thank you very much.
I think Jessica has another question.
Thank you. So, yeah, thank you for the study. This is, I think, really helpful and quite thorough. I was wondering about your sort of piggybacking on what Richard was just talking about in terms of, and the concept of some things change, some things don't change the way you expect. How frequently do you recommend updating these enrollment studies? I think, I think of either every 5 years or every 10 years, depending on, unless something really significant changes, et cetera. But I'd be curious about your thoughts on that and what you tend to recommend to folks.
Sure. Well, we like to try, our goal with these forecasts is to be plus or minus 2% at the district level. That's our kind of our target. Our goal is to be plus or minus 2% through the life of this forecast. And a lot of that's contingent on the assumptions holding. And I always tell any district, if you look at what's happened in the last 10 years, nobody would have been able to call all of the surprises and crowbars that got thrown into different things through the last 10 years. At any 10-year period, there's a lot of changes. So I would say to keep an eye on that enrollment. It should be tracking pretty well, but I think around 5 years would be a good time to revisit and look at, for an update, so you have fresh look at the current conditions and all those different variables that affect change. And we're at 2025, so the next census will be in 2030. And this last census, it was 3 years delayed because of COVID. And I don't think that's going to happen the next census. Usually we'll get the data about a year after the census, around April, around the April of the next year, of like say 2031. So that would be a good time to take a fresh look when you have new census data, or if enrollment starts to deviate from forecast, that's when I would maybe take a look sooner and try to understand why.
Go ahead. Yeah, go.
So there's also a lot happening at the state level with vouchers and charter schools and all of that kind of stuff. What kinds of changes at that level should we be thinking about having an impact on us?
Yeah. Whenever we talk about vouchers and things like this and open enrollment, I always go to the state of Indiana, and we do a lot of work there as well. And the state of Indiana opened up pretty much open enrollment. Anybody can enroll into a district from out or out in, and basically opened the doors for open enrollment. And it has really caused a seismic shift in migration from what we have seen in the past. Now, you are a relatively more sort of a rural district, in that you don't have a whole lot of urban centers around you for people to move back and forth to and from. So I think you may be a little bit more cushioned from the impact of the vouchers. But I think that what you can expect is if those vouchers open up, especially if it's a voucher program where they're getting funded or they're getting reimbursed to participate in private school and those types of things, it's something that you're going to need to keep a close eye on. I would imagine that if that comes in play, if anything, you're probably going to see enrollment being below what we forecast, just because that market share is likely going to change. And more people may opt for non-public options and things like that. But another factor is depending on, a lot of it also depending on how they write it in the state and what the legislation says. But a lot of it depends on how well the districts around you perform compared to your district in terms of performance, because that does create what we've seen is that the flows in and out of districts is correlated to maybe the perception of the district, or maybe it may be real educational performance comparisons, but that has a factor, comes into play too.
Great, thank you. Does anybody have anything else for our consultant? All right, we want to thank you very much for joining us tonight and for giving us this information. This is very helpful, and we are grateful to you all for the work that you've done. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Have a good night.
You too.
I do have a question for Amy,
Okay.
which is, this is a very useful piece of demographic data. Am I free to share this?
Yes, I was going to share this with the city manager. I know
Oh, perfect.
John Dontrema asked to share with his force, but I think
I
we
wonder if
should
the
share-
DEI Commission would be interested in sharing it on
Absolutely,
their
and I
portion of the
believe
website.
Our partners in Plainfield.
And I'm going to send it to all the planning board members.
Great. Share the information. Love it. All right. That brings us back to the superintendent's update.
All right, I have a very brief update tonight. As you know, a message went out today about the closure of Route 12A in South Main Street Bridge. We worked closely with the city, and we were updated this afternoon. It was really important for us to get the messages out to our families that are living on 12A, for the public to know that we only have one spot for the bus to turn around, and that would be Romano Circle. So all of our administrators called families that lived north of Romano Circle to inform them that they would have to get their children to Romano Circle for the bus stop. We also are moving back bus times, approximately 10 minutes to anticipate for the increased traffic. We're hoping that is enough. We will adjust accordingly, if not, and we'll communicate. But I did confirm from the principals this evening that all parents were notified of that change, and I did ask them to give grace tomorrow for families that may be arriving late.
So for clarity, that's 10 minutes earlier.
Yes, so I think our buses at Romano Circle will start at 6:30 instead of 6:40 a.m.
So were there any families that were contacted that expressed that this may create a hardship for them getting
No,
there, especially the younger kids there?
I think some of them were taken back because they hadn't received email before the call, and this came as a surprise for a lot of the families in the area. So we're going to continue to try to work with them and what other options have. So we were able to shift some buses around. We do have a bus that goes to Crafts Hill, which is in walking distance. After speaking to Principal Roach, important to try to maintain that bus. So we're going to be able to shift a smaller bus over there, able to make sure our buses moving along. So we anticipate we will travel along up to exit 19. We will not take the Glen Road because it will be very difficult for our buses that turn, and we all know that lots of increased traffic there. So we've also had conversations just about routes to Hartford.
Has the city indicated how long the closure will be? I know the first email that sent out was just about the sidewalk, and it said 30 days. But then
Right.
it seemed like the second email that said the full road closure did not say how many
long.
days.
I know they're trying to get a temporary fix of the braces piece, and that is supposed to be a shorter term, but we have not heard anything definite. I anticipate Mr. Mahalan will probably get a meeting together with the Department of Eds, and he's been great about communication.
Yeah, I know the project, as included in the capital improvement plan, was for one lane to stay open in each direction for the duration of the actual, 18-month, $21 million bridge replacement
Right.
project.
Yeah, so I think now it's about securing material, steel
Yeah, good point.
bases, and making sure that we can get them timely manner. So if buses, we're finding that they're running late, we've sort of calculated our hours, make sure we have enough hours closest for our elementary. So if we need to move back bus time earlier, we can do that as well.
I was hoping it all gets sorted out.
That concludes my update.
Great, thank you. All right, that moves us to unfinished business. Discussion and action, second reading of policy BEDDA.
I'd like to make a motion to adopt policy A.
Okay, motion by Wendy,
Second.
second by Richard. Any additional discussion? No? All right, Jessica is still with us?
Yep.
Yes, okay, great. We're still going to do a roll call vote. So Kevin,
Yes.
Richard,
Yes.
MJ,
Yes.
I'm a yes, Wendy,
Yes.
Tia,
Yes.
and Jessica.
Yes.
Okay, great. We're going to, we're still tabling. We have still tabled. It's not untabled.
Correct. It will be tabled till we receive that from our attorneys. Richard and I did meet with Megan this week and got some guidance. Hoping to get that to us as possible. It will also include ACAA, DAB in the ERs as well. Thank you.
All right, so we don't have to do any action on that because we'd have tabled it previously. All right, new business. We'd like to acknowledge the $250,000 donation from Shaw's Supermarket. Do we have any additional information about that?
25.
Sorry,
2,500.
2,500. I'm so sorry.
Don't get me wrong. I would love.
2,500. Apologies.
No, I actually was contacted by Shaw's with their opening, and we were invited down there with the police and the fire, and they presented the district with $500. So we want to thank them, and then leave this weekend. They are going to stuff a cruiser and donate that food to the Lebanon School District, which will be donated to our weekend food program. So I'd like to thank them as a terrific partner.
Thank you. We are grateful, as always, for a donation from Shaw's and from all of our partners. Is there any additional public comment in the room? Any public comment online?
There's no public comment online.
Okay, we have one additional business before we go into non-public ones. All right, so we have several board members, long-term board members leaving today, and so we just wanted to officially thank them for their years and years and years of service on this board. Mary Eads could not be with us today, but MJ DiDomenico and Wendy Hall are leaving us, and we are grateful to them for all that they have done, and so we have something to present to them. Now, and something from the district to commemorate your service. And if these sizes are not correct, you can just let Amy know. We can switch them. And we are, as I said, we have appreciated all of your perspectives and your contributions to the board, and you will all be sorely missed. So thank you very much. All right, Why don't you go ahead and do the committee updates while we're here. Finance and Facilities met on February 10th. The next meeting is TBD. Policy Committee met on February 3rd. The next meeting is TBD. AEC Education Committee met on January 13th. The next meeting is next week, March 10th at 4:15 at the SAU office. PNN met on November 7th. The next meeting is also TBD. Student Wellness Advisory Committee met on January 8th. Their next meeting is in May. HACTC met on December 3rd, and their next meeting is next week, March 12th at HACTC. Area Committee met on February 27th. Do we have anything to share about that? Our last meeting.
We just all shared our budgets, our collective bargaining with Grantham, went through negotiations as well. They let us know that the collaboration between Cornish and Plainfield Middle School at this point, but they do have something on the ballot to do. Cornish and Plainfield should be fine.
All right, thank you. The next meeting, I think, actually is in May as well, I believe.
May 20th.
May 20th. School District City Task Force met on January 23rd, and their next meeting is also TBD. It's the end of the year, as you can see. And the Housing Task Force met on February 27th. John is not here, so we'll get an update on that next time. And their next meeting is March 17th at 2025. Actually, we'll get an update on both of those meetings. And important dates and district announcements, citywide voting, we encourage everyone to come out and vote on March 11th. And our next school board meeting will be March 19th at 6:30 p.m. So I need a motion to go to non-public under the
MJ, your last
It's just the-
reading us
My
into
final
non-public.
Make a motion to go into non-public under NHRSA 91A 32C.
Seconded.
Okay, motion by MJ, second by Richard. We will do a roll call vote. Kevin?
Yes.
Richard?
Yes.
MJ?
Yes.
I'm a yes. Wendy?
Yes.
Tia?
Yes.
Jessica?
Yes.
Yes. All right, so we will go into non-public. And Jessica, we're going to send you a link in just a minute for that.
Jessica, can you check to see if you received it?
Did you email it?
I
Yeah,
did.
she just barely emailed, so it might be in your SAU email.
I'm not seeing it yet.
Yes. Could you do that? All right, 1 second, Jessica. All right, Jessica, if you can give that a couple minutes, I just watched her send it. So we'll go into non-public and I'll give you a call on the phone if I haven't gotten that link, okay?
Sure. Yep. Thanks.
Thank you.